Welcome to a Jerusalem Lights special. I am so honored and delighted to welcome Peter Himmelman. Peter is a rock star, a Grammy and Emmy nominated musician, composer, award-winning author, artist. He's written amazing books about the craft of writing and about creativity. And he teaches writing. And he's also an observant Jew, a Shomer Shabbos, a Sabbath-observing Jew who unabashedly and consistently demonstrates such powerful commitment to Israel and to the Jewish people. His music has moved me and been a major part of my life for 40 years. Thank you so much for being with us today, Peter, and welcome.
Thank you very much, Chaim. Appreciate it.
So I don't know how to do this even. I'm like, I have these records of yours from when people used to buy CDs. And you know what? When I first started to follow you, and I would see things like BH, or like Bet Hey, Baruch Hashem in your records, and I would listen to your lyrics. I was like so transfigured because I felt so many secrets of Torah coming through in your music. Like I really felt that you were completely plugged into such a high source. And I don't know, is it me or is that what you're doing?
I think it's just you. I always write about what I'm feeling. A lot of it is, to say that it's not intellectual is not exactly true. There's obviously intellect that goes into writing of songs or prose or whatever it is. But there's also something that transcends the intellect. We call it spirituality, if that's a word, ruchniut, if that's a better word. And sometimes these things, they just kind of come, just like in a conversation where we don't plan exactly what we're going to say. Some people do. They're generally not the most interesting. And for me, the songs of mine that I've written that I feel the closest to, they almost come as a gift. I know that sounds a little bit treacly to some, but I've talked to a lot of really great writers and songwriters, and we don't advertise this too much, but everybody knows what I'm talking about. It doesn't happen a lot. But those things that it wasn't that you had to sit and think about each word. It sort of was handed to you. And if the things that I got and received in that way are received by you in a positive way, then it's all worthwhile.
I think that it must be the same thing with all creativity, and also like in terms of writing chidushei Torah, like Torah thoughts. That in the Zohar there's this language, Rabbi Shimon Patach, that an introduction to a piece is that Rabbi Shimon opened, and the idea is that he opened like a conduit, like it's here, the knowledge is here intuitively, and it's waiting for someone to be able to receive it. And then, I think that this also touches upon the relationship between music specifically, all creativity really, but music specifically, and prophecy. And this is something that I'm very eager to talk to you about. I always felt growing up that I don't come from a religious home myself, and I felt like my earliest childhood memories of Hashem speaking to me was through rock and roll. My earliest childhood memories are what was on the radio. And it was like a spiritual experience when you turned on the radio and what you had always been waiting to hear came on, was before live streaming and all the platforms. And then as I grew older and I learned, like in Kabbalistically, that there's a very strong relationship between the gift of music and prophecy. And I always felt that music in these waning end generations are like the last window of real prophecy in the world.
Yeah, music is, I don't remember if it was a midrash or whatever I was told. I always liked this idea that the angels were arguing with God. How can you give humankind music? It's so powerful. And they said, I think the analogy was, it's like giving a sword to a child. Of course, God said, hush before the world returns to, dust and ashes. But it is true. I mean, for good or ill, music has a lot of power. And in terms of, let's say, prophecy, maybe it's small p prophecy, things that come to a writer or to an artist, and they themselves are not sure exactly what it means. It's not something that's common for them. It's something that must have come from some very deep inner recesses of a person. And then it appears, and then you sort of look at it and wonder what it is, as though it had not come from one's own self.
There's a midrash that tells us, it speaks about the two different languages in Psalms. Sometimes it says Mizmor LeDavid, and sometimes it says LeDavid Mizmor. Sometimes it says a Mizmor, a song of David, and sometimes it says for David a song. And the midrash talks about the idea that when it says Mizmor LeDavid, that it's exactly as you're describing, that it came to him, it overpowered him, but that when it says the David Mizmor, that King David a song, that it was something that he worked on, that he kind of turned his prayer.
It's great. Yeah, I can relate to that. I think as I move on and get grow as a person, as a Jew, as an artist, I have a lot of trust and little bitachon that these things will come, and I allow them. I think, as you said, that every human being is capable of this. For, let's say, a musician or a poet or a writer who spends all day long doing these kinds of things, they develop obviously a craft, sort of a keli for these ideas that other people don't necessarily engage in on a regular basis. So you develop a pattern. My pattern as a young man, young boy writing, which I did as a kid, was very outward facing. This was an idea I wanted to purvey, and I knew exactly what it was. And generally the ideas were, at some time in my youth, just things that would be funny or highly, sexualized, as the radio would play. And, I could do that very well. And later, I guess it was around the time when my dad got very ill. He got lymphoma when he was very young, and I was young. And it made me a more serious person. And I started having the courage to write about things that I felt were very important. I shed my vulnerability to one extent or another, and I found that I'm 66 now. I'm talking about when I was 14. And at various stages, I became more and more open, or a little less afraid to dig into these depths and write something that I wasn't even sure of, that might not have been even mine. Mizmor LeDavid style.
Mm-hmm.
And I found out a lot about myself and the world through that kind of writing, those kind of songs. And I see how attractive they are to certain other people that feel, the highest compliment I could get would be, I feel so much the things that you've written about, and I thank you for giving voice to them. And I have a responsibility because this is what I've chosen to do. I've taken the time to do this. This is my life's work.
Do you feel that you're bringing godliness into the world?
I hope so. That's a good question. Sometimes,
Isn't everything really all about godliness?
yeah, it is. Somebody, I wear my yarmulke in the store around. I'm in Los Angeles, and don't live in exactly super Jewish part. So when I go to the store, there's not a lot of people with yarmulkes, and some guy came up to me, and I could tell he was Jewish, and we started talking, and over the frozen food section, by the frozen peas and sardines on the other side, and he goes, apropos of what you're saying, he goes, well, what's your point of view? What do you think? I said, generally? He goes, yeah, that's a broad question. I said, well, there's many layers to the things I think. Some of them I wouldn't share. But if you're really asking me a serious question, this is again over the peas and the sardines behind me, I said that the majority of my thought these days, and maybe post 10/7, because every Jew has had some sort of crossing over a transom of some sort. I said, what I'm thinking about and trying to think about is simple, that God runs the world, that God is recreating reality and beyond what we can conceive of as real at every moment. And the moments are so small, they're not even considered moments. And that thinking, which is aspirational, I don't have it most of the time, it's something that I work on, is a helpful thing. I don't think that it's brought me into a fantastical place. I think it's brought me into a more tachlis, real place. I think it's a better way of defining reality than what I suppose is the inverse, which is the way that I grew up, and maybe you did as well. You did take it for granted that everything is just random. You heard about the Big Bang. You heard about, evolution, which didn't include divinity because nobody believed really in God, anyone around me, at least not vocally. And I tried that experience for a long time and rejected it out of hand at every step. But it wasn't till later when I understood that Judaism contained in it something that I'd always searched for. None of it was truly novel. And this idea that the miraculous is everywhere. That certainly the way that we're speaking right now and thousands of miles apart on these things called microphones, and there's this thing called electricity, all of that. But much more than that are words that are formed by these, our mouths, the mechanics of speech are transmitting thoughts in our head to each other, and we understand it. And if you dig deeply into that, you'll see, and maybe this is back to where we started about Mizmor Le David, you will find things that are not just at the forefront of your mind. You'll find things that are deeper and surprising and probably thought of as crazy by people. But, as a, quote, artist type, I'm expected to do that. And sometimes I'd like to say that that's not just for a, quote, artist. There's no such thing as an artist. Even, quote, artists are repeating themselves all the time. They're not in that place where they're literally creating new things. It's a very rare thing, by the way. There's a famous saxophone player called Branford Marsalis, one of the greats of the newer players. And he improvises for a living. That's what he does. That's what jazz consists of, using these musical elements and sort of composing on the spot in a way. And somebody asked him in a magazine article, how often are you improvising which was a seemingly ridiculous question because that's what he does. And he was transparent, and it was beautiful what he said. He said, I'm only improvising. I've probably only done that 20 or so times. And the writer was like, well, what do you mean? He said, the majority of the time, and this is no small thing, it's still brilliant, I'm taking this catalog of material that I've amassed and grabbing it and reciting it. It's a brilliant thing that he can do, and we all sort of do that from our storehouse of experiences. But creating something completely novel in the moment, that, he said, I've only done about 20 times. I thought, this guy knows exactly what he's talking about.
You actually just wrote a beautiful blog, like recently this week, a couple of days ago, about your process of writing, and you were describing how kind of like other people's music also is something that you digest, and that if it appeals to you, not the music itself, but a certain mood or a certain technique or a certain feeling, and that is something that you're able to translate into your own terms. I think it's all a process of Ruach HaKodesh, what our sages describe as divine inspiration. Everything is really divine inspiration, isn't it? Because we're all trying to deepen our relationship with the Creator all the time, and everything is a manifestation, like you say, of a miracle. And it seems to me that music.
Well, what you're saying makes me think about this idea that we, let's say, in popular culture, and that's been going on for millennia, and I'm not talking about modern popular culture, Greek, Roman, whatever you want. The idea of a secular world is the most fantastical thing of all. There isn't such thing, something devoid of, quote, the miraculous, or, something that is bereft of wonderment. We've only imposed that wall on ourselves. I was speaking to this woman, by the way, in Minneapolis, who takes care of my mom, who's 93, and the woman's probably in her late 30s. Wonderful woman. She's Somali. She's Muslim. And we're talking about, the lunar calendar. She's not by her own admission, she's not a scholar. But I asked her, do you know any Muslims, whether they're out partying at night or whatever they're doing, that don't believe in God or Allah, however you define it? And she laughed. She goes, no, there's no such thing. And somehow only a Jew with his or her wily brain can construct a secular world for themselves. Creating complexity, enormous layers of complexity to prevent themselves from seeing what is the most simple reality of all, that all is wonder, and wonder basically is the wonder of God, however you define it. I mean, God is a difficult word for a lot of people. Mm-hmm. And I think in America, Jews, they pull back from the word. And my thinking is that they're pulling back, in a sense, from anthropomorphized ideas of God, Christian ideas. And in some sense, they're good Jews for doing so. But nothing has replaced it. Nobody has sat and explained any kind of definition of God is completely wrong. We don't have a definition. That is the point. And you can't even say it's beyond definition, because that's also a narrow definition as well. And it's I think we are reluctant to surrender to the idea that we really don't know much at all. Even the greatest scientists, and I've spoken to some very, very well-known great scientists, and the greatest of them say the same thing. We don't know anything.
I think it's a lifelong work, just full-time, just to try to wrap one's mind around this reality. And certainly this is the odyssey or the mission of the Jewish people, and really all spiritual seekers, to try and really feel that this is real, that we have a relationship with the source of all life, eternal life. That's who God is. And like you say, it all falls short, any attempt at definition. But music somehow it speaks on the soul level and gives this kind of exhilarating hope of what the soul is really touching upon eternal life. It's like a window into
Somebody mentioned this to me. This is kind of, you got me thinking about this as a question was posed. There's a friend of mine, Rabbi Simon Jacobson. I don't know if you've heard of him.
Sure.
He wrote a book called Torah, Meaningful Life. And we're speaking, he goes, you might consider why music is the art form that's most popular. In other words, the iPhone was made to listen to music, not to look at pictures of sculpture or art, visual art.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we gravitate to music. We sing, we dance to music. It's part of everyone's ritual. And the reason that it's so popular, I think Simon posited, was that, let's go from the back. Let's say architecture, which is, artful as can be and can be. But it has within it a very gross materialism. It is a temporal item. That's its nature. Then you have sculpture, which is more refined. And I'm not, besmirching architecture at all. I'm just explaining how it sort of narrows down. Then you have painting, which for years were visual representations of real things in life. And then it became abstract. But it's still pointing to things in the physical world, color, shape, form. Then you have, let's say, poetry or lyrics, which are pointing to or purveying things in the physical world or emotions, definable entities. And then you have music itself without lyrics, which I don't do that much of, that has no form. In actual fact, there's no tangibility to music. It's sound waves that are invisible that move air waves, which are more, seeable or studyable. And those waves move the hairs in our ears, and it creates a whole emotion in our head. But the music itself is a non-temporal entity, and it defines nothing about the temporal world, or even closely the world in our head, but somehow it is the most spiritual of all the art forms. And in cases where music can make people dance, it can make people bring back their childlike natures, it can make them do all sorts of horrible things too. And you can cry from music. That's a strange thing. I mean, I've been on stage and seen it happen. It's kind of an awesome thing. Serious musicians know that's a probability. It's a possibility. And the serious musicians have a lot of respect for the very idea of music and what it can do for people and for themselves, maybe most of all.
You're something of a polyglot, really, because you are so multi-talented. You are an incredible writer. You are a visual artist. We see some amazing things behind you, and you're a musician. Are you first and foremost a musician?
I think I'm first and foremost. They used to do this thing in kindergarten where the teacher, she was not a good teacher. And she would put a scribble on a paper, and the kids were supposed to make something out of it. And I remember it was easy for me, and I made a witch on a broom because I could see it, just like somebody sees a figures in a cloud. And the teacher said, you cheated somehow. I was like, how am I don't have the vocabulary to explain to you, ma'am, how wrong and how awful you are, and how scurrilous this lie is that you're telling me. But first and foremost, I'm a person who desires to make order out of chaos. All the musical possibilities, all the paint possibilities, all the lyric possibilities, it's a bunch of chaos. And how ordering them must be some homeopathic, infinitesimal degree of God creating from tohu vavohu, and the pleasure that brings when you have made order out of something and then given that something as a gift to somebody and they were moved by it.
You know that in the Beit HaMikdash, in the Holy Temple, the songs of the Levites is one of the most important features of the service, and the whole daily service is kind of like not doable, not valid without the song of the Levites, and that is like called in the Kabbalistic literature a sweetening, sweetening of the harsh judgments because of the power of song in the world.
Yeah, one thing that is true that we can feel very tangibly is galut. You don't have to look too far. And then you can extrapolate on the beautiful things that we have and never come close to what was going on at the height of the Beit HaMikdash before it became, defiled and bad kings. And, what would it be like to have the locus of the universe, the portal to the spiritual world, to God, in a crazy, impossible to imagine, paradoxical sense right there. And it closed up. And so we took our Judaism on the road. We put 2 challahs on our Shabbos table to represent the showbreads. And it was a brilliant thing, a sad thing, that the exilic Jew is like a child creating a world of memory and existing in it and playing in it. There's I think his name was D.H. Winnicott. He's a child psychologist, and he studied children and how they go into this state where when they're playing, it's not fun and games. They're half in the real world, and they're half in this imaginary world. And then they may be more completely in the imaginary world, existing in this world of play. And that's something that adults have dismissed as childish. No utility, no efficacy in that kind of state of mind. Now, I found it to be very efficacious, very utilizable, to be in the physical world, but for moments at a time lost in it. And this is where the music comes from. This is where the writing comes from. And every person can access that. The other thing, to study, let's say, Torah and become wiser than you were the day before or the year before. That's a great endeavor. But the endeavor is incomplete. What is the transmission to someone else? Thinking about if it's real, why can't you tell it to a so-called secular person?
Mm-hmm.
Why do you feel that it's not a responsibility in some way? And what are the limitations in creating those bridges? It could be that the one who is trying to purvey it is the one with the liability, not the one who's receiving it. A liability of knowledge. You sitting around thinking about this all day long, this is your work. Well, if you can't transmit it in a way that's joyous and uplifting, and I don't even want to use the word non-judgmental, because that's of course not, then you have to go back to the drawing board. And, thinking about Israel right now, because we were just there, as you know, I saw you and gave you a hug. This is a duty for people. And I spent a lot of time in Israel speaking to, I have, an enormous number of friends in every walk of life, not only in Israel, of course, here. And one thing that I heard, which was understandable but surprising for the number of times I heard it from so-called secular people, that after COVID, and then 1,000 times more after 10/7, they felt bereft. They asked my wife and I, how did you, we looked like a normal person on the street. They wouldn't know that I was from except for a yarmulke. How did you get your children to get married and have kids? What did you do? And some of these people didn't have that opportunity. Just going to shut this off 1 second. I wasn't going to go into the whole thing, but I let them do it. They said, we were raised as people around, our age, a little younger, a little older, some, on the idea of Zionism as a secular, democratic idea. It was staunchly non-deist. It was, at times, had antipathy for that. Well, this woman I'm just thinking of in particular was an artist, or is an artist, and was raised in a very secular Zionist home. And she said, I think I've recognized that there's a big flaw. It's not supporting our young people. It does not. It built the state, that's for sure. It did a wonderful thing. But it doesn't have an answer for today. And it doesn't mean that everyone has to go out and wear a gartel and put on Rabbeinu toms or whatever, It could just be that they start thinking about the world as broader than they had assumed it to be. That this religion that we were given, which said, everything just happens by random. It's random, which is a horrifying way to live. If that's the way that the dogma that you've imbibed, it's terrifying. And it's also, as I said, it's a created, sophisticated fantasy. It doesn't echo reality. And though this woman didn't quite use this language, I knew she was saying the same thing. She was bereft. There was a paucity of something vital.
Israel's in a tremendous state of upheaval. I can't describe it in words what it's been like to navigate through these years. And here again, you've come across as being so defiant. Sometimes it's almost like you seem like alone against this wave of all these so-called great artists that are so outspoken against Israel. And the things that you've written have been so evocative and for me emotionally powerful. The tremendous defenses and the beauty that you've written about the people of Israel and And since October 7th, you've been so prolific also in that regard. Has it been like a tremendously life-changing event for you?
Yeah, without a doubt. I mean, 10/7. I'm not alone. I mean, it's funny maybe to some of your listeners that are in Israel. Well, what's this guy in America like? What's his deal with this? But I know a lot of people, a lot of Jewish people in America that feel as I do. It has to do with the Jewish state, for sure, what I'm writing about, but much more so, it has to do with Jews. We're a family, a tribe. We're not a religion. As you know, there's no shorish in the Hebrew language for a religion. And that's a telling idea. We're a family, a tribe, a peoplehood that has Torah as its terra firma, as its fundamental basis. It's 15 million. It is tiny. It is numerically insignificant when you compare it to other religions. But the potency of the Jewish people, which everyone recognizes, our greatest haters recognize it perhaps the most, and the lovers of Israel. It's a unique people, as it says, people that stands alone. Now, that doesn't mean that we don't need friends and allies, but there is a singular aspect to the Jewish people. How did we survive intact for 27, almost 3,000 years in exile with our suitcases and our challah and our salt on the Shabbos table and all those little things and our Torahs that we took? What is that? It's a proactive thing. It's proactive, the Jewish people. The memories are proactive. Even the sad memories, the tragedies, are meant to spur us on. There's certain chemicals that have potencies different than others. There's certain flavors. And when you talk about going up against the tide or the wave, it doesn't affect me at all. First of all, in the music world, when I started, I was already, when I got my first record deal, it wasn't long after I started to keep Shabbos, and I told the record company president, this Italian guy who passed away, was such a great champion of mine. I can't use the invective on this program that he used when I told him I'm going to keep Shabbos, and he laughed. He's Italian, so he knew Jews, and he thought I was kidding. I was turning down shows to open for different artists, and then he recognized that I was serious about it. And he became serious about it. And rather than backing off of me, he supported it. He liked it.
But in general, your observance, your Shabbos, has it cost you? Does it continue to cost you?
You talking about in actual money?
No. I mean, in terms of your career,
Yeah. I mean, it has a cost, but people ask me that too. But what did I buy with it? That's not what they ask. I bought a beautiful family. I bought time on my own where no one can seize it from me. I bought understanding. I bought deeper connection to a peoplehood. Whatever it was that I lost in terms of sales, or what I got was, in a positive sense, unbelievably incommensurate to what I would have gained. I like what I do. I have a body of work that I stand behind. I have kids, Kanainahora, and grandkids. I don't I don't regret it at all.
When you were growing up in Minnesota, did you have Shabbat at home?
No, we did. I shouldn't say no. We did have, my mom would light Shabbat candles occasionally. There would be, times would be more regular. My grandma spoke Yiddish. We sometimes had a Shabbat dinner with a kiddush and maybe a challah. And we were so Jewish. There wasn't any talk about God. And I've said on other podcasts and things that had I been speaking about God, I'm sure my mom, not my dad, would have sought in a very kindly way therapy for me. You know, it was never really talked about in our shul either, which made synagogue the most boring thing in the world, except for the people and the ways I would laugh during services. We knew we were Jewish. I went to Israel. They took me, my family, and my cousins all went en masse to Israel in 1968, June of 68. So you can imagine what Israel was like. And something was transmitted to me that made me care very much for Israel. And I've recently been thinking about what that was. And we met all these relatives that had gone east, gone to Israel from Romania and other places, and we went to America. We just, split. We went one way and they went the other. And we found those people. My mom did. She had like a sheet of paper with some phone numbers. And those people met us in cars, in a caravan. They had one of the cars, it was a Susita. And they took us, we didn't know who they were, threw us in the back of a truck. And I was 8. I was 8 years old. I mostly played with ants on that trip, except for the time when I stood in front of the hotel and cried as an 8-year-old boy, which is something that happens to me whenever I touch the hotel now. I go back many times and I hope it didn't wear off. I hope I didn't get used to it. But what I surmised on my reflection back, what was the turning point, what was the unique quality, is that it was a kind of love. I experienced in my own family. It was very loving, but not in the culture. It was a kind of love for one another, even with the fighting and the shrieing that was, of course, I didn't have language for it. It was just a feeling. But I felt so at home there. And I still feel that way when I go back.
So are you an American Jew or a Jew in America?
The latter for sure. I mean, I'm a, proud American, but for sure a Jew. I mean, what are you, a male? What goes first? Human being? I said that would be first. Are you a man or a woman? Probably a man. A Jew, before a father, before a husband. That's probably what it is. It's up there with the foundational definitions of a person. Doesn't preclude me from being an American by any means.
But you have a strong sense of exile, and your sense of Jewish identity is so overpowering that I could wonder how you could navigate through the daily vicissitudes of the frustration of what's going on there. Now, just let me say this, Paul Simon and Carole King are two Jewish people. I love their music. I grew up with it. It meant so much to me. It still does. Paul Simon signed some kind of a letter, about Israel. And then a couple of weeks ago, 2 weeks ago, I read that Carole King, joined this thing, no music for genocide. She doesn't want her music distributed in Israel. And it hurts me personally. Like, I feel like, what's wrong with you people? Like, I felt like personally hurt by that kind of like betrayal. I just don't get it.
Well, I mean, I think about it a lot, and maybe this is a very cynical way of looking at it. I mean, things are always multi-layered. They have many layers, and based on our prejudice or our need, we'll pick on one particular layer and unsee all the rest, or refuse to see the rest. One of the layers is they've seen all these horrific pictures, and they feel for it. The other layer, where I'm being a little bit more cynical, but I believe it's a layer. Fame, huge fame, is not something that most people know about, so they have no way to judge it. They literally lack the understanding of what it is to stand in front of an audience and have them cheer for you. It's an unnatural thing. It's like an elixir. It's a dopamine hit that is unbelievable. And it's very dangerous too, because if you don't have something higher than that, you'll never be satisfied. It is a kind of, first, every, Maslow's human needs, acknowledgement is, I don't know, it's way up there, almost around food and water, if you think of him as defining reality, that Jew. But acknowledgement is huge. And here you're getting a dose of acknowledgement that is, it's distorted. It's not what if you're looking for that, if you ever wonder, and I'm going to get back to Israel in a second, why so many marriages break up among, quote, famous people, because they're not getting that acknowledgement from a partner. Well, how can a partner give them? It's unnatural acknowledgement. I used to come home from the road, and my wife would just hand me the baby and like, what do you want, applause? I was thinking, I wouldn't say this, God forbid, but like, I do. Like, I need acknowledgement. Now, that's a way to instantly break up a relationship, because you're needing something that's not true. You've injected into the relationship a falsehood, a false premise. When it comes to Israel, the idea of saying something, and this is this layer that I think is somewhat cynical, although I do understand it well. It's not popular, to say the very least. It is unpopular. It is unpopular to the extent that it might even be dangerous, and it's certainly dangerous to a career. It's probably lethal to a career. And you say to yourself, I am Jewish. I have allegiance to some degree to the Jewish people. In some cases, I may not be married to a Jew, but there is some vestige of me, some pintel yid that exists. But it's too hard to access because I have a need, like an addiction, that must be fed. And it's understandable. I say this as a person with a certain kind of intimate knowledge. I mean, I've never been super famous, but like I've had a taste, and I understand its power. And therefore I understand, and sort of the longest winded answer of ever to your question, why? Because in the absence of something more powerful, you will cede always to the less powerful, which is the protection of this career. And it may be good. Maybe the career is feeding a lot of people. Maybe it's feeding philanthropy. I really don't know. I don't want to castigate it as completely wrong, but this is one of the thoughts that comes to my mind. Look, I'm a product of the stories that I was told, the experiences that I had, which made me, from a very young age, a very proud and strong Jew. Just like somebody born in Gaza has very strong feelings. I'm not judging either of mine or theirs, but they've heard a story where we might have had a calendar with a JNF calendar with a picture of the Kotel on it. They have Al-Aqsa. Maybe Carole King didn't get the kind of story that I got. She got a whole other story. She was super famous. That story was huge, much huger than anything I experienced. So in that sense, I judge her much more lightly.
Yeah, and I didn't mean to make it a judgment call, you know.
No, but it's a curious
it's just that it's something
thing.
I feel so strongly because we're like it's this maelstrom, you know. We're like struggling to survive really against this machinery, this insipid machinery that is based on falsehoods and blood libels, and people just buy into it like useful idiots. This media generated, just slipping into this maw of diabolical misrepresentation, and it hurts me when people can't take a stand.
Well, look, I mean, this is the Hanukkah story all over. I mean, it's, the few against the many. You have billions and billions of dollars going into this enterprise. And it's an easy one to sell because fear and hatred sells. Judaism is trying to purvey a very delicate idea, which is contrary to our notion of physical reality. Every Jew who's trying to observe mitzvahs understands that. They themselves, unless you're a tzaddik, and even they have to work on it, understands that, we live in a physical world. That's what we live in. You have to constantly press your intellect if this is of interest to you. That has to be, you have to have a desire to do that. And even with that, you're never quite there. This leads me into Mashiach. And what I think, nobody really knows what it is, right? Nobody, it's not something that's jot and tittle elucidated on. It's something that if you're curious about, you have to wonder. I think that, let's say, when you are in a traffic jam, maybe you have to go to the bathroom, the radio's on, you're hearing some horrible stuff, and you just got to get where you got to go. I mean, you're just in a very foul mood. And your mind is in the katnut state. It was very constricted. And there you are. On the other hand, when you are holding your first child for the very first time, you don't care about politics. You don't care about, if you're a sensitive person, you don't care that somebody took your parking spot as you're going into the hospital. None of it matters. You are in a gadlut state of mind. You're in an expanded consciousness, to borrow that word, that phrase. Now, how can you expand on that idea of the expanded consciousness? How can you extrapolate upon that? Where every moment is like you're holding your first child. And every moment is so beautiful. Even the garbage can, even an old shoe, something that exists, that you understand is being put there by the constant word of God to exist. And then you won't want to go to war. You don't care about your parking spot. You don't care that somebody made more money than you, or has more hair, or more record sales. None of it matters to an extent that we can't even appreciate this expansion. And that's what I think it is. Now, I only understand that from the basis of my constricted mind, which is awfully constricted a lot of times. So the parallel, I can see there's something on that side. Now, how does it come to be? I have no idea. Some say it's a new song. And I love that as a metaphor. Going back to Branford Marsalis, the 20 times that he improvised, it was new. What is a song that's totally new? What is a strand of words that has never been constructed before? That has not been said, that is so powerful to make the constricted mind seem foolish. Just like Shir Malot, we will rise from our sleeping with laughter, skolpinu, in our mouths. Why do we laugh? Because the nature of humor is the instant colliding of these paradoxes. On one hand, our assumptions about the world. The state of mind is contracted, and all of a sudden it gives way to this expanded thing. And we laugh because it'd be the ultimate joke, the ultimate result of a new song.
The ultimate relief.
Yeah.
This is exactly what the holy sages teach about what is the expression? There are 9 songs throughout the history of the world, and the 10th song is the song of the revelation of Mashiach, because it's, like you say, it's a liberated, expanded consciousness that we don't even have the vessels to contain now. It's a completely different way of looking at things when all of creation will burst into song.
Yeah, and I think, those things, of course, are real, and they're also metaphorical.
Sure.
I think they can exist at the same time. I guess you could say that I am anticipating that. And I'm anticipating it because I've seen it in my own life in microcosmic ways, extremely microcosmic. And if that microcosmic flicker of an idea, it was real for me, just the idea, it gives me a sense of its possibility to play out more broadly. How does it happen? So that you could sit with enemies and understand the miracle of our mutual sentience, and war would not make sense at that point. And that 15 million tribe who has been trying to push this story again and again well, they may have a special place at the table. Oh, I see what you're saying. And the ones that are going to be most surprised about it are the people who have been thinking about it and praying for it. Because whatever ideas they've come up with, it's going to fall way short. They'll be laughing again at that.
I feel that this is what you've been singing about all these years, and your music has evolved and matured as you've grown, and remember from the days of Sussman Lawrence and all through the decades, your voice becoming so honed and your themes becoming so perfected. You have a new album coming out pretty soon, right? That you shared with me.
I don't know when it's going to. Did I share it with you? Did I send you it?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's coming out whenever I feel like it. It's like when I have time to promote it and things. But it's in the can, as they say.
So you have such a body of work that you're still producing. And then there's your writing. I mentioned, I don't know if everyone's aware, but you have a subscription-based Substack almost daily. You've been writing for quite some time now, a couple of years, amazing essays. And then I wanted to talk just a little bit about your book. So you have the first book is Let Me Out, right, which is about the whole creative capacity. And then you have this beautiful book, Suspended by No String, which is basically focusing on, I guess, songwriting, really, but it's so much personal, biographical memory in it. It's you have a way of taking the stuff of your own life and making it so accessible. Like, I really wanted you to talk a little bit about your Grandma Rose, because it's like so breathtaking, your childhood memories that seem to be so universal, what you're feeling and how you've been able to translate it into life-giving music and into life-giving words.
Yeah, I wish I had that book around. I just did a book event and sold them all out. Let me see if
maybe
I
you
can
have a
pull
guitar
something.
around.
Oh, yeah, I do have a guitar around. Hang on a second. Hang on. Let me see if anything's in tune around here. Yeah, let's see if this old thing's in tune. Check 1, 2. So yeah, the song or the story I tell about in my book, it's not quite about songwriting, the book. It's about what we're talking about now, but not in overt terms, let's put it that way. Just through vignettes and stories and different things. Check. So we didn't have like a observant house, but it was so Jewish. My grandma Rose in particular, she spoke a lot of Yiddish, and she was just so loving, and she was always at the house. Somebody was always eating like schmaltz and on challah, and like somebody was talking Yiddish, and they would come over usually on like Sunday morning. All my cousins, be whitefish in a newspaper and bagels and lox. They'd come, and my grandma used to sing this song to us kids. I have 4 siblings. One of my sister died, but let's just say 4. I'd keep it at that. And she'd sing this one song. She always sang it. It was called. It's a folk song, and she was born in a shtetl near Tulcea, Romania. And she said to me that, it had cow manure on the floor, doll. It smelled sweet. It wasn't terrible. Like it was somehow, they were poor. I got the message. And she was babysitting, as it were, for this neighbor woman whose child was sick and her husband had just died. And now it seemed that the child had the same illness as the father. And my grandma was, 9 or something, just a year or two before she set sail to America with her brother Sal, who was 2 years younger than her. Imagine 2 kids at that age sailing across the Atlantic. They stayed in Halifax for 6 months all alone. And the woman was singing this song, which I don't know if I have all the words right, but when I was a kid, I was like in 8th grade, and I used a lot of herbal pharmacology at the time. And I thought, well, I need a special hookah pipe for such an endeavor. And I commandeered tubes and things from the science class, which I was failing out of. And I intended to create this hookah pipe. And as I'm going downstairs, my grandma was often at my house, making patlagel, eggplant, Romanian eggplant with like red peppers and small cucumbers. And I make it now myself. I didn't like it as a kid, but I like it now. As a kid, I'd probably want a McDonald's hamburger, fish burger. And she says, "Oi, Dal, you want some patlagel?" I'm like, "No, Grandma, I got some work to do." I went downstairs and, crafted the pipe, and came back upstairs in a different state of mind. I don't advocate pharmacology at this point in any way, but this is what happened to me. And then I saw my grandma in a fully different light. She was old at the time, and all of a sudden, I just didn't take her for granted. I realized that she would soon be gone. And she just became so beautiful to me in a way that I hadn't thought of her before. And the memories of the shtetl, and it brought me somehow to a consciousness of being part of this chain of generations. Now, mind you, I was 14 years old, involved in all the 14-year-old pursuits, and then some. And I said to my grandma, all of a sudden, "Can you sing me that song?" "Oi, Dal, what?" I said, "Ein Schleif, mein Kind." "Oi, ein Schleif, mein Kind." And she sang the song. I said, "Slow down, I'm going to get a pencil and paper." This was me in my inebriated state. Still, I was clear enough to seize the moment. And I took a transliteration of the lyrics. And here's her, sounds so much like her actual voice. "Ein Schleif, mein Kind, dein Egelach." And then I sang it back to her, and she was, pretty pleased. And then as she got older and sort of drifted away, her mind was like, wherever it went, my mom would call me back and say, "Sing the song, for Grandma so she could come back to the world." And she would. Then she'd sing it a little bit, and then finally she didn't sing it at all, and that was kind of the end of that. Let's see if I can remember the words. And if you're a Yiddishist, excuse what I wrote when I was a kid. Ein Schleif, mein Kind, dein Egelach, in Sursin, in Nemmer nicht in mir. Ich hab dein Vater verloren, bist die nur ein Monitor gewesen. Sie klugt in Wein, wo sie hat dich geboren, in Sursin, in Nemmer nicht in mir. Ich hab dein Vater verloren, bist du nur einmal toll gewesen, bist du nur einmal toll gewesen.
So beautiful.
Yeah, now that's like that's a legitimate folk tune that somebody in a house in pain just made up. Sleep, my child, your eyes. That's the syntax of the Yiddish, which is such a beautiful idea.
Wow, so beautiful, brings her back to life. That whole world. Peter Himmelman, it is such a joy to talk to you.
Chaim, now that
Thank
we're
you.
friends, it doesn't have to be a special, invitation-only thing.
Thank you so much for joining us today. Give our audience of true spiritual seekers all over the world, Jews, a lot of Gentiles who love the Torah, a lot of people that are wondering what it's all about, looking for something deep in their life. Give us something that we can live from. Give us some hope and encouragement in these waning end days.
Well, it's like this. There is a creative force. As a capital C and a capital F, creating in a literal way all our reality. And this creative force has the ability to change things based on our requests, based on our actions. There's an idea in Judaism, bitachon, that is a little different from the word for faith, which is emunah, which is that things will be good, things will work out well. I'm going to give you a higher level, which is bitachon. Things are already good. My plane was really late the other day. There's an easy way to practice bitachon. It's like, it's already good. It's fine. I'm going to be late. This is taking me somewhere important, doing something. And you constantly practice that all the time. And there's certain times when that is a lot more difficult to think about. But like anything, not just the idea of practice, that's how God made us. We improve with practice. And my blessing would be, first of all, that in good health and happiness and joy and success and abundance, spiritual and material, you engage in this practice. You become more aligned with this creative force. Call it God, if you will. The name isn't as important as the understanding that there's something far higher than all of us and of the material world. And may it be so, and may you be happy right now.
Amen. Amen. What a beautiful bracha. What a beautiful blessing for everyone. And I want to bless you too, you amazing Jewish man. You are absolutely, like I said, a true poet warrior. And you are like standing on the forefront of the spiritual revolution of your people and of the whole world. And what an amazing artist you are. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you,
Pesach
Chaim.
Mordechai.
You got it. Chaim. Well, right now I'm going to make some gorma sabzi for Shabbos tomorrow, Persian delight, and gondi, if anyone knows the foods of Persia. And that's what I'm going to do, is Persian Shabbos tomorrow.
Wow. Shabbat shalom to you, Peter, and to everyone.
Shabbat shalom lachem mi California, lekol haolam.
Amen.